Friends, today we're going to paint some battle damage on this poor, knocked out Storm Tiger that likes to fall apart in my hands. The best way to start is with chipping. This method is a multi-stage process and probably the most time-consuming weathering technique of all time. The first layer has to be very light. In this case, I mixed a pale yellow version of the base coat from AK Relics. For the initial layout, we'll use the classic sponge method. It's excellent for random shapes and quick coverage, although I have to admit it's not my favorite technique, even if it's very effective. The best way to start is on the wheels and lower hull, because these parts usually get buried under layers of dust, or even better, mud. That's going to be the topic of the next week's video, wink wink. It's a safe place to start, and even if we go overboard, it's still gonna look convincing in the end. Once we move on to the upper surfaces though, it's smart to dial things back. The amount of wear is entirely up to you. This can be kept extremely subtle and controlled, but I painted enough models to know that most of these scrapes will blend in beautifully and leave you with a rich, textured finish. Another neat trick is to switch between different sponges, or at least rotate the one you're using to vary the shapes. But since I don't enjoy this step at all, I personally don't bother and just get it out of the way as quickly as possible. Still, it's one of the most efficient and effective methods around, and I can't imagine my workflow without it. Now, let's switch mediums. I've mixed the same pale tone from oils, but this time we're applying it differently. With an old, stiff brush, I flicked the paint onto the surface, the so-called speckling method. It's a lot more fun than sponging, and it adds another layer of random chips with minimal effort. The best part is that if you don't like some of them, enamel thinner will erase your mistakes instantly. Yeah, the quantity looks excessive right now, but trust me, once everything is done, it'll all blend together. Before we start painting the steel chips, let's first add some primer with my favorite oxide paint. I love working on German tanks with Zimmerit for two reasons. First, the jagged texture of the Zimmerit itself, and second, the damage. The way it worked in real life is pretty simple. The Zimmerit was applied directly onto the oxide primer at the factory, and then the whole tank was painted in dark yellow. So when it chipped, the oxide primer peeked through. Let's move on to the steel chips. For this, I use my trusty mixture. 2 drops of drying retarder, 2 drops of tap water, and 4 drops of dark gray AK Relic. It's probably the only stage where I follow an actual recipe, but even here the ratio can shift depending on my mood. Still, consistency is just everything. If the paint doesn't flow right, the chipping won't look right either. A good brush also helps. My favorite is this 00 Kolinsky from 502 Abteilung. The long bristles hold a good amount of paint, and more importantly, they introduce a bit of natural randomness, which is exactly what we want here. When it comes to steel tones, I can recommend you 2 colors, dark gray and black brown. Most of the time I stick with the gray though. It captures the deep tone of bare steel and works beautifully once you blend rust effects on top of it. Black brown already has that rusty vibe, but combined with additional rust tones, it can be a bit too much. The color of your model matters as well. A tank painted in Panther Gray, for example, looks much better with brown chips. So it's not just about authenticity, but also about contrast. By now, you can see how the 2 chipping stages play together. The light tone represents shallow scrapes that didn't cut through the base coat, and when you fill them with steel, suddenly they look 3-dimensional, like little craters in the paint job. The pale outlines also make them more visible. Without them, the chips would stick out awkwardly on the yellow areas and vanish on the brown camouflage. And of course, this is where you can have fun with contrast between different materials. Thin sheet metal parts chip differently than thick armor plates, and large areas of exposed steel can become nice focal points. That's why careful construction pays off. Every bolt, weld, or damaged surface gives you something interesting to paint. Now it's time to tie everything together with rusty oil paints. I've got two tones here, although I'll be using just oxide patina on this model. I just wanted to show you both because the rust color is a personal preference. For years I leaned on darker tones for subtle rusting, but lately I've just been enjoying the lighter, more vivid approach. You can even combine both of them for maximum variation, which would look absolutely amazing. Again, it's all up to you. In fact, adding rust on top of chips might be one of the most divisive tricks in armor modeling since color modulation. But because our Sturmtiger got smacked and abandoned, I'd say we've got the ultimate excuse here. Now, you don't have to use oils for this, of course. Plenty of enamel rust products exist and they work just fine. I just prefer oils because they're easier to control. A, you can tune the intensity by how much you thin them down, and B, they've got higher surface tension, so they stay exactly where you put them instead of spreading like wildfire across the entire paint job. For maximum control, subtlety, and overall good vibes at the workbench, oils are just my go-to. Just remember to drain them on a piece of cardboard first, just like I showed you last week. One last tip. I usually blend the effect twice. The first pass feathers out the edges and softens them, and the second makes it all tighter and cleaner. Oils give you basically an entire day to step back, rethink, and adjust the result. But why stop here? I didn't squeeze out the industrial earth oil paint just to watch it dry. Dark streaking effects are another stylistic choice for trying. Used over the entire model, they sort of tend to just darken everything without adding anything. Used too sparingly, they can feel a bit artificial. And to make matters worse, they demand precision and a steady hand. First rule, follow gravity. Second rule, ask yourself when the streaks happened. Were they forming while the tank was still rolling around, or after it got stuck in some ditch and abandoned? Those details change the direction and flow of the effect. And check it out. Remember all that excessive light chipping we did earlier? Well, it's pretty much gone, seamlessly blended into the surface. That's the beauty of multi-step weathering. Many of these techniques look odd or overdone on their own, but once the layers come together, they really click. Oh, and I almost forgot one last little detail. Shiny metallic chipping on the weld beads. It's subtle, but not really, because it's so shiny. The effect creates a perfect contrast against the rusty chips, and if we spend hours sculpting those weld seams, we might as well make them pop, right? Anyway, enough of the small stuff. Let's move on to some heavy damage. Deck Tan is my go-to Zimmerit color. If you ever want to start a fight at a model show, just ask people what the real color of this stuff was. Personally, from the photos I've seen, it looked like a light sandy shade, but I prefer a slightly desaturated tone because it contrasts beautifully with the three-tone camouflage. And in a lot of wartime pictures, it looks almost pure white, so there's definitely room for interpretation. Now, I've said before that heavy washes over Zimmerit are a big no-no. They just drown the surface in grimy horribleness, but we can enhance the jagged texture by adding chips along the edges. The best bit though is replicating leftover adhesive where the Zimmerit has fallen off, exposing the oxide primer underneath. This is the ultimate contrast game. Dark red primer and pale anti-magnetic body. Details like this are what really draws attention to the model. Back in the day, when I was younger and had more brain cells, I always tried to add one big detail to every model, something that immediately caught the eye. Now I'm old, always tired, and running on 3 monsters a day, but luckily, German tanks with Zimmerit are the ultimate cheat code for visual eye candy. Just peel off a big section of Zimmerit and suddenly you've got a whole texture playground waiting to be painted. Exhausts are very easy if you can paint them separately. If not, well, they're still doable, just not quite as fun. Normally I'd paint all of this with a sponge, but in this case everything had to be done with chipping fluid and an airbrush. I used a photo of the real Sturmtiger in Munster as a guide, and what caught my eye was how the corrosion was heaviest in the middle of the stack. To capture that, I combined the hairspray method with some delicate painting. It's a great combination. The hairspray gives those random sharp edges, and the fine painting enhances the subtle textures. Adding those random shapes with diluted acrylics is pretty fun, and I used the same approach for the remnants of the yellow paint. Compared to standard rust tones, heat-affected surfaces develop their own unique patterns and textures, which makes them another detail that stands out on the model. The techniques themselves aren't complicated, they just need a little patience, but the time investment is worth it. And now the final boss of battle damage, penetrating impacts. I mean, you can't get any more damage than this unless you want to rip the tank open. I wasn't sure at first how far I should take the effect, because impact damage changes a lot depending on what happened afterward. In this case, the reference photos suggest the engine compartment didn't catch fire, so that ruled out any burn marks. What I did instead was stick to the standard effects. Heat-affected surroundings with an airbrush, spalling around the impacts, some of which I had already added during the construction, and then adding the smaller shrapnel damage with a fine brush. A few quick rust washes pulled everything together. And for now, I'll just leave it like that, because these impacts were the very last thing that happened to the real tank. This means they need to look fresh, so we have to make sure the dust effects won't tone them down too much in the end. Anyway, that's it for this week, my friends. At this point, we're ready for the final part of the series. Next week, we'll add earth effects, paint the tracks, stains of dirt, moisture and grease. And of course, a few finishing touches to bring everything together. The plan is to keep things subtle so all the hard work underneath still shows through. The whole paint job should be about abandonment, not the usual dirtiness caused by frequent use. Honestly, beating up German tanks with Zimmerit are some of the most fun subjects in World War II modeling. The textures, the colors, the layers of weathering, it just never gets old. I definitely need to do more of them in the future. For example, a battle-worn Stück 3 with concrete armor and Zimmerit that everyone keeps asking about. And by everyone, I mean like 3 people, but that's all I need. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found this video interesting. I wouldn't be able to run my channel full-time without my patrons. Their help allows me to have an endless supply of cardboard for my oil paints, and if you're one of them, thank you so much, because if it weren't for you, I just wouldn't be here doing this full-time. My Patreon is honestly the best place where only the coolest kids come to hang out. I post regular updates there, share work-in-progress photos, various thoughts and observations from the workbench, and we keep in touch through DMs, comments and emails. Top tier patrons get early access to all of my videos completely ad-free, and they stay there forever, so if you like listening to them while you're modeling, it's the best place where you can go. There are also bonus extras like 3D printable parts for your own projects, reference photos from real-life locations, and high-res studio shots of my models that show way more detail than video ever could. Your financial support is appreciated, but never expected. The first few videos in this series were fun and easy to release on a weekly basis, but once I started filming this one, I remembered why I dropped the weekly schedule in the first place. But we're finishing the model next week, so don't worry. And remember, build your models, don't just hoard them. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!